I'm not sure what this press conference at 1 is going to be. I guess the Space Force, the announcement was moving that the headquarters of that from Colorado to Alabama. And so I would assume the president would be more than eager to talk about Chicago, given that he sent out some social media posts talking about the violent crime over the weekend, some high numbers here for Labor Day weekend, after what had been a summer that had seen that murder rate down about 30% consistently, a little spike this weekend. The president claiming it's the most violent city in the world. I think objectively we could say that's not remotely true. It tends to not even be in the top 10 or 15 per capita in terms of murders per capita. Number one in terms of total murders, far more than LA and New York, for sure. But, it gives more fuel to this sort of campaign by Trump to send in federal resources to help fight crime in Chicago.
Do you think he'll also be, we assume that he's going to be taking some Q&A following whatever announcement this is about the Department of Defense, which again, we believe is about the Space Force moving its headquarters from Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama. But also a federal judge ruled today that Trump administration, their deployment of federal officials to Los Angeles violated federal law. Do you think he'll be asked about that? And how does that pertain, if it does, to our city of Chicago?
Certainly, and it pertains huge to the situation in Chicago. So the president sent in the National Guard to assist with immigration enforcement in L.A. The governor there, Gavin Newsom, sued, saying federal law states, and we've covered this many times here, federal law states that the governor has to request the National Guard unless in very rare or extreme instances of a national emergency. And clearly with this ruling in L.A., the president calling the Guard in L.A. against the governor's wishes did not follow the law and certainly could not be construed as a national emergency of the type that would be required in the Constitution to have the president be able to forego the traditional route and call in the National Guard. So the judge rules that was illegal, although they're not ruling that the National Guard has to leave right away. That means the president, there is clear legal precedent here. The president cannot call the National Guard into Chicago for crime or for immigration unless the governor calls for it. And this operation this week is not expected to include the National Guard, expected to include more federal ICE agents. That the president absolutely has the authority to do that under Homeland Security. So the question is, will that then lead to the National Guard coming in to assist with, which again, that federal law states, and the National Guardsmen were doing things that federal law does not allow them to do. The National Guard has very limited role in terms of what they can do domestically. National Guard is usually there to go overseas to foreign conflicts when needed. And so here in the States, what they do is, like the DNC, the governor did call the National Guard to be on standby, just in case, there were riots that would break out or things got out of control. And the National Guard does crowd control, and they guard infrastructure, they guard buildings. Those are the things they can do. But in terms of policing, they can't do. So I spoke with Gary McCarthy, the former police chief, who said he doesn't think that, the National Guard would have a role in helping bring down crime unless, just standing or patrolling along Michigan Avenue or something like that deters someone from shoplifting or something like that.
Just the presence alone, which is what people who are supporting this plan kind of say, just having their presence here might deter some crime, right?
They're saying that, right, the presence of having, troops, if they're armed or not. But there's the other side of that saying, well, it could deter people from coming downtown or going to business. I mean, I think there is some data in D.C. that restaurants were struggling and had a drop in business because of folks, the National Guard. And Governor Pritzker wrote an op-ed today with business leaders saying, business leaders are concerned that it could have a detrimental impact on people coming downtown and patronizing businesses if they see armed troops walking the streets. I think what local officials, they haven't really done a great job making the point that federal help fighting crime is a useful thing, no doubt, when it comes, and in the first Trump administration, they did authorize more prosecutors, federal prosecutors, to come to the U.S. Attorney's Office here for violent crime. or grants or money to hire more full-time police officers. Those are things that if there wasn't such a contentious relationship, you could envision local leaders saying, okay, let's up the ante here. If you want to help out, if this is really about helping out crime, then let's talk about more U.S. attorneys, and let's talk about more FBI. Let's talk about more DEA for drug investigations, and more police officers. Those are things that any criminal expert will say can help, that cities desperately need, given the resource crunch and budget crunches right now.
And most city leaders would welcome, I would think, right? More police officers.
Well, it seems like Mayor Johnson is, yes, most city leaders would. Mayor Johnson is kind of taking this tack of, no, it's not about policing. It's about,
sure.
Violence intervention. It's about community programs. And like, nobody, having covered this for so many years and talked to criminologists, nobody has the magic bullet for what brings crime down or what brings it up. It's so many factors, and factors like, poverty play a huge role, and kids not in school and no job opportunities, and what's going on in home life and stuff like that. And social media, maybe a huge role, social media, in terms of the tit for tat violence that we see. So all of those things are part of the stew. And to boil it down to just one thing, the National Guard, it makes for a good soundbite. It makes for good visuals. But in terms of, does it help bring crime down, we just don't have the data to support that. And they're not trained in doing those things. That's not to say they can't be useful in terms of guarding buildings or again, like you said, their presence. But so many different things go into crime rates that you kind of need an all-in approach to help chip away at it.
Right, but we tend to think that this, and this is the date still Friday, because I know that date, this coming Friday, just 3 days, was kind of floated around the end of last week, as perhaps we'll see some sort of activity in Chicago. Is that still kind of the time frame we're hearing?
That's what we're hearing, and I think, Elizabeth, that the notion was get people here today, get them set up at Great Lakes, and then get ready for the deployment by Friday. But we can only go on reports, and I think government officials have been pretty close to the vest about what their specific plans are. As Tom Homan said to Fox News the other day, well, I don't want to give away, to the bad guys, quote unquote, what we're doing, so we're not going to really give more information. So it's kind of it's kind of, we have to wait and see what exactly happens. But it does seem like they for sure will be doing stepped up immigration raids. And will that be outside immigration courts, as we've seen? Will it be at businesses? You've got the Mexican Independence Day celebrations happening in 2 weeks. Those can be, that could be combustible when you see how many people are out kind of carousing and partying and celebrating that. Things can turn bad, and then you put in federal troops and immigration raids, and it could be a very combustible situation.
Sure. So
we're going to have to watch for that, whether that's what they plan to target. And immigration groups plan to protest basically either way. So you will see protests, you will see more action, and I think a lot of activity, Elizabeth, as we sort of get this thing ramped up.
Sure. And over the weekend, Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order talking about all this, but it seems like it's is it worth anything, or was that just kind of a finally Dad putting his foot down, saying nope, not in my town?
Yeah, I think it's in terms of whether it's worth the paper it's written on. It comes down to whether you believe a local municipality has that kind of power, or federal law enforcement supersedes that. So you can sign a law saying federal agents can't have to be not wear masks and have clear identification. But what's going to happen if they don't follow that? Will they be arrested? I don't think local police want to arrest federal agents. Will they be prosecuted by the state's attorney for not following this executive order? Probably not. That would be very hard to believe that would happen, or that the state's attorney wants to prosecute for that, or that local police want to arrest for that. It's just kind of one of those things of like making a statement, just like, the sending, we talked to Nick Spizzato. He's a Trump supporter. He's conservative. He's a city council member And he said it's showmanship and PR on both sides. Basically, calling in the National Guard, he believes, is not an effective tactic in practice, but it's effective PR. But then, all these press conferences in opposition, same thing. Signing executive order, same thing. Doesn't really have any legal backing. I don't think we know until local police actually act on it and arrest a federal agent. And then we'll see what a judge says. So I don't think anyone wants it to get to that point. I think a lot of people would like more collaboration from the president and the governor and mayor instead of antagonism. I mean, the president antagonized them, antagonized the Chicago. They antagonize him, say, not in our backyard, and doesn't seem like a recipe for collaboration. Whereas, again, you could see local leaders saying, put your money where your mouth is and let's talk and collaborate. And send us resources for sure. So you're not seeing that.
And someone has to make that first phone call. We do have.
It seems like no one has. No one's called. Right. They communicate as so many people do these days via social media.
That's true. And we do have Governor Pritzker, Mayor Johnson, other Cook County leaders. They've got a press conference coming up at 3 o'clock this afternoon to talk about this. Again, we're still waiting on the White House. President Trump is supposed to be talking about a Department of Defense announcement, which we believe is the Space Force moving headquarters from Colorado to Huntsville, Alabama. So we're still monitoring that. That has not started yet. It was supposed to start about 12 minutes ago at the top of the 1 o'clock hour. We're still monitoring that. But of course, in a couple hours here, we have our own press conference about our leaders talking about what you and I have been talking about, Paris. We keep talking about it, but we still don't know what the plan is.
No, I think we don't, and I think that's why they're calling this press conference, is to sort of inform Chicagoans on everything they know, what their plan is, and what the rights of immigrants are, undocumented folks, or folks who are maybe here on special visas or green cards, or in the process of getting their citizenship. I do think that it is a worry among immigration groups that folks who are in the process are going to get swept up in some of this, and the administration has vowed to go after only the most violent criminals, and of course we've seen anecdotally across the country where they haven't, they've taken folks that didn't have a criminal background. It's just and again, I think for sure we expect the president to address this at this 2 o'clock, since this is hot on his mind, and it's getting a whole lot of coverage today. I'm just watching the cable channel Fox News, and they've been on it wall to wall right now, interviewing some of these Chicago Red founders that have been very vocally critical of Mayor Johnson and supportive of Trump. So it's a political bonanza, no doubt. And Chicago has always been kind of a political, let's say, football, in both senses. The politics of this, the president, when he looks at the politics of this, I think he sees this as beneficial to him. Crime is something that he's seen as strong on. Mm-hmm. Chicago is maybe code word for, big blue city that has, a crime problem. And so I think he thinks this is a winner for him, and painting Democrats into a corner, trying to portray them as pro-criminal if they don't agree with him that the National Guard should come. So there's a lot of politics and political posturing wrapped up in these talks. Obviously, we're interested in what's going to work in practice. Can we bring crime down? And I think that gets lost in some of this back and forth. Like we don't know what the National Guard plan would be. Should they be called in? Are they being trained? They're not trained as police officers. Are they being trained to do some basic level policing? They don't have jurisdiction to arrest anybody here unless someone's violating a federal law. So I don't know. It's never been used that way is the thing. It is, the governor's getting some criticism for having them on standby for the DNC, but that is typically the kind of thing a governor would call in the National Guard for, again, for huge, where there's millions or hundreds of thousands of people in one location. There's protests, things could be combustible. You don't want property damage. You want to control traffic. And that's where the National Guard has really gotten helpful. In 2021, they were called up, just in anticipation that there could be mass protests against the shooting of Adam Toledo. And then, in 2020 as well, after the George Floyd
George
protests
Floyd,
and some
right.
things turned into looting and rioting. That's where National Guard assists police officers in doing the crowd control and guarding buildings. So the idea is then police can use all their resources in terms of crime fighting. So it's kind of like a backup kind of plan.
And that's what they're
in a
trained for.
situation like that.
Right, right.